welcome to Mama Drew How To. I know several of you have mentioned that you would be interested in anything cooking related video wise. So today I was getting ready to do a recipe for you guys, and then I realized, wait a sec, maybe we should talk about some of the tools of the trade before we get into actually making something. So we're going to talk a little bit about cutting boards today, and then we'll take a look at what we're going to do. So disclaimer here, I am a real person and this is my real kitchen. I know there are gorgeous TV kitchens and they look wonderful, but they're not real life. This is my real life. So we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so let's start off with the very basics. First off, you want to make sure before you cut anything or prepare any food that your counter is clean. So, yes, you could use a disinfectant spray, and if you've just moved into an apartment, you probably should use a disinfectant spray just for that initial cleaning of your apartment. But don't cut your food right on here after you've used that, because then you run the risk of that spray residue getting on your food and you ingesting it. You don't want that. So I would recommend you take some water, warm water and soap, or you can do white vinegar or apple cider vinegar, because those are, if you know from your microbiology classes, those are great disinfectants as well. And then just wipe it off with, I'm using a paper towel. You can use a rag. Just make sure that you wash them on a regular basis, because otherwise you're going to have bacteria growing on your dishcloths, and basically you're going to be spreading bacteria all over your countertop, and you don't want that. So my favorite cutting board that I use a lot is this wooden one, and I'm going to be using it tonight when I slice up the eggplant. Now, one thing you should never, ever do is cut meat or any kind of raw food like raw protein. So any sushi, any chicken, fish, beef, whatever, don't do it on your wooden cutting boards, because they're very porous, and the bacteria, because you're scoring the thing with a knife, and so the wood gets cut, the bacteria goes in and it does not come out, and then you run the risk of food poisoning later when you're using it to chop up vegetables. So just let your wooden cutting boards be for vegetables. And same thing kind of goes with these. Now you could have a cutting board. These are some of ones that I picked up at Walmart. I really love them. You could use one strictly for meat or fish or whatever, but again, you're still going to get that germ, bacteria stuff in there, and you're going to run the risk of food poisoning. Look at this here. Now this has always been cleaned after each use, but you can still see there's orange from the many carrots that have been sliced. There's some kind of red stain there. So clearly, no matter how well I clean this, there's still stuff here. In fact, after a while, these things should be gotten rid of or put to another use, and you get a different cutting board. Now some cutting boards will have a rim like that, and they don't on the other side. And you're like, cool, I can use either side because the material's the same. And you can. I would probably mostly slice something dry on here, like bread. Because on this side, this is, so like when you're slicing a tomato, the extra juice and stuff goes into this rim, so it's not going all over the cutting board and going out onto the counter. Speaking of countertops, now you may notice this is not a granite, this is a quartz countertop. And so the temptation is to go ahead and slice stuff right on the quartz countertop, which I have done with my meats and chickens and then disinfected the countertop. And you certainly could do that with something like this, but if you are renting, I would suggest you don't do that, because if for some reason some kind of damage were to happen to the countertop, you could lose your damage deposit. You don't want to do that. So I suggest you don't use your countertop to cut things, although it's very tempting to slice your watermelon on a countertop, let me tell you. So what do you use to cut your meats and stuff that you don't want sinking into a cutting board? Well, you use something like this. Now this actually is very similar to one my parents had when I was growing up, and maybe you have been lucky enough to get one of these from your mom or someone who maybe you found one at a yard sale. And basically it's kind of a glass cutting board here. So keep in mind that means things are going to be more slippery. There's more prone to having a cutting injury. You got to be careful with it, but it is wonderful for your protein cutting stuff because you can cut it on there. It's not going to sink into the cutting board at all. It washes off. You don't have to worry about food poisoning. So those are the reviews on cutting boards. So quick review. If you're renting, don't cut on your countertop. If you bought your home, you may still not want to cut on your countertop. Use non-porous for meats, fish, chicken, anything that could potentially poison you if it were to sink into the cutting board, which it will if you're using a porous cutting board, like the Walmart special cutting boards, which are nothing to sneeze at. I do like those. Or your trusty handy-dandy wooden cutting board. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started, but I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mama Drew How To, and be sure to like and subscribe.